Welcome to Podcapers, the official podcast for a place to hang your cape. And this week, 4 candles? No, 1 candles. And it's a graphic novel by Lyndon White! Cue the music! Hello there, capers, and as I said, welcome to Podcapers, the official podcast for a place to hang your cape. My name is Scott James Merridew, and this is the show where we talk about various geek and nerd-related topics, and are joined each week by a very special and different guest. He's been on the show twice before, once before as a regular episode, and another time at a live event at Worthing Comic-Con. Capers, give it up for Lyndon White!
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's very good to have you, very good indeed. How have you been since we last sojourned on our little voyage together to discuss our most beloved comics of all time, and you stole one of my options!
I know, stole your thunder right before you went there as well. Yeah, it's been good. I mean, technically, happy anniversary, because this is a year ago from the Sebengal one, so yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that! Jeez! Time flies when you're having fun. Oh god, I've been through so much! Oh god, I time travel, Lyndon! I time travel! We won't go into that. That's a whole can of worms we won't go into. What I do want to go into is this brand spanking new project you've got going called Candles.
Yeah, it's a new one. It's the one I've been quietly working on for a while, and then I got to start screaming and shouting about it last month, which is it's always good when you're working on a big project.
Yeah, I mean, you've kept it under your hat fairly well. I'd say I haven't heard a peep of it in like the indie comics place to hang your cape web, as it were, on the grapevine. And I'm just looking at, you haven't had a chance to send me a lot of material in preparation for this, but the little that I have seen, Lyndon, I'm excited. I am an excited boy!
Good, that's what we want. Like, I've got a little bit, it's for tease, just to keep you interested, and then that's how we get you.
Oh, and you have got me. Because, I mean, more and more lately, I'm realising that I am just this big, huge fantasy nerd. Mm-hmm. And here you are, catering to my needs, like offering a dying man a glass of water in the desert.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people don't realise like how much fantasy they actually like, and then I think everyone can pretty much say, oh, if they don't like fantasy, they're like, oh, I love Lord of the Rings, or there's like always at least one kind of story, or like Game of Thrones, and they get them that way.
Yeah, it's a broad umbrella term, it really is, but the classic fantasy, the higher fantasy, Tolkien, Martin, all those sorts of stuff, I don't know, it just kind of appeals to me more than other genres, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just like a kick I'm on right now, maybe in a while I'll be back onto sci-fi, who knows, but I don't know, for me, with sci-fi, it always kind of gets a bit technical, and it also is a little bit like you have to explain things, the world is just, it feels very rooted in a very hard concepts, which is fine, and I like in certain scenarios, but fantasy just, for me, I think offers much more exploration for, I don't know, both story and character and plot, but also lore and worlds. And it feels like there are just less rules.
Yeah, I think depending on your world as well, I mean, as soon as you throw magic into the mix, or elves or anything like that, you can kind of, gives you tools that you can pretty much write whatever you want. I mean, with sci-fi, you can do the same, but you kind of want to base it around some kind of tech or some kind of, well, it's in the name, science, so you've got something to ground it on. Whereas fantasy, you can go, well, we've got elves, okay, we can have, a million different types of elves, light, dark, and just run with it, which is fun. It gives you a lot of tools to play with.
And magic in and of itself, I think I've discussed this before on the show, it does have to have a set of rules. You can't just do shit willy-nilly, but the shit you do is, I feel a little bit more constrained, and you don't have to go into it as much. You can just like, ooh, I made fire. How did I do that? Well, I drew on my inner mana reserves, and I said a word like in the air in Latin or something, and boom, fire. However, if I was in a sci-fi story and I said, here, I have this teleportation device. How does it work? Well, it scrambles your matter down and into subspace band high frequency, and it's a lot more involved, a lot more explanation going on, and maybe it's just because I demand explanations from everything, and if I don't get one, I get angry.
start raging. I mean, Doctor Who does that a lot.
Yeah.
Doctor Who is, I mean, I love Doctor Who, but at times it will do some timey-wimey bullshit, and it will correct the plot or whatever's going on in the story, which is fine. It's fine. Don't hate me. But
No.
it's one of the things that it does, and it's a really good way for them to explain stuff away if they need to.
Yeah, there's only so many times, however, you can reverse the polarity of the neutron flow before we start to notice a pattern developing.
Yes.
Mind you, on that note, fantasy has its own pitfalls. Like, there's only so many times you can count on massive giant eagles to bail you out of any situation.
Yes. I mean, why we didn't do that in the first place, who knows? But made a pretty ending.
Oh, pretty. They're always at the fucking nick of time. Always. It's just like they're just hanging out. Wait, guys, we're not needed yet. We're not needed yet. Okay, now we need it. They're going to be so grateful for us.
I mean, maybe we're just finishing, like, laying their eggs for the season, and that's why they couldn't do anything to begin with.
There are male eagles, surely.
Guarding the nest? I don't know.
Maybe they're like penguins. It's fantasy. You don't know. It could be anything.
Yeah, I mean, giant eagles. I mean, there's no pretense to this, is there? I mean, we can't go ask a giant eagle like what they do with their eggs.
Oh God! And I just want to rant a bit more about some of the fantasy stuff. Like one thing I watched recently, which is like a hidden gem which I had no idea about until I just discovered it one day, and now I'm absolutely fucking in love, and I can't have any more of it right now, and I'm really, really, really upset about that. I don't know if you've seen Hilda.
Yes, I'm a big Hilda fan. Absolutely love it.
Did you read the graphic novel?
Yes, all of them.
Is it as good as the series?
I've been telling people for years that Luke Pearson's paneling animates on the page for you, which is typical because now it's an animation. It's incredible. It's probably some of the best sequential storytelling you'll see.
Oh, you see, because I remember seeing the trailer for Hilda ages ago, and I thought, well, that looks rather lovely. And just like the classic lovely, like something that nice warm feeling you get where you see, like, I don't know, Paddington Bear or something. It's just like, oh, that's lovely. And then you go and watch the show, and not only is it lovely, but it's heartfelt and a little bit creepy and full of adventure and wonder and whimsy, and it's funny.
I mean, the cavalry rabbits. You know, they're the best thing on telly now. You can't really top that, I think. But yeah, it's I love that it's quirky and cute and really heartwarming, but it does have peril. Like they didn't miss that bit out. There's actually consequences in peril, and you know, not everything goes to plan, which sometimes can be, particularly when you aim fantasy towards kids. There's a habit that nothing bad can happen. You know, it's a fantastical world with pixies and elves, and you know, nothing can go wrong. The hero's always going to be okay. But with Hilda, she does get herself in situations where there is, well, not everything goes to plan, or she doesn't always do the right thing, but she tries to do the right thing for her friends. It's really good. It's lovely.
All topped off with a really unique aesthetic, I think, and a really unique art style, and just a really, actually, I would say kind of unique. It did remind me, speaking of Bone, another fantasy thing we both really like. But the humour was very different to that. I found it differentiated from itself a lot, except for the Woodman. The Woodman looks a lot like a wood bone. Yeah.
I mean, we'll let that slide. You can have it. You know, it's brilliant. I mean, have you read the graphic novels yet? Or...
No, that's the thing. I had no idea of this thing's existence until I saw the trailer, and then months and months later, literally end of last month, I just started watching it on Netflix.
All right. Well, if you see them, buy them because they keep selling out. Now that Netflix has come out, I went Travelling Man today and they're sold out, waiting on order. I went to Waterstones, they were sold out, and we had to go around the other side of Manchester today to actually find a copy of it. So yeah, and they're well worth paying. I think you can get a single Hilda book for about £8 each, and they're incredible. Print quality, and if you like the show and you don't even read that many comics, which hopefully you do if you're listening to this.
I would hope by now, Capers, you would have actually listened to me and fucking picked up some comics.
You'd hope so, but even if you don't, they're so well done, and they're not a challenging version of comics. They're very digestible and very, like I said, they're so well drawn, and the sequentials are so good that someone who doesn't necessarily read comics should be able to understand them. Like, I could give this to my mum, who's probably read the Beano wants, and that she could probably read it.
Yeah, it's I think it's one of those things that just has a universal appeal, and maybe we'll get you into comics, maybe it won't, but either way, it'll just be a good time, and it looks like that's something that a few of the characters in Candles are not having.
Yeah, nice segue, very well done.
I'm pretty good at this by now. Like 80 odd episodes in, I found my way into a nice segue. But I think before we go any further talking about the characters, we do have to talk about what actually is the fucking Candles story about.
Right. Candles is a self-contained graphic novel about a young girl and her quest to steal a witch's magic and use it to save a dying village. That's in a nutshell. It's a hero's journey. It's got a witch. It's very traditional Brothers Grimm fairy tale. But not everyone is having a good time. Things aren't easy.
Have you read the Brothers Grimm stories? None of those characters have a good time.
Exactly. But I know how much you like Disney. Disney have kind of give us these rose-tinted glasses towards these classic fairy tales, and everyone thinks, there's some dancing mice, there's a sing-along. These are what the fairy tales are about. But
I refuse to watch a story about Cinderella where the ugly sisters don't have to dance in red-hot shoes made of iron until they die. Thank you very much.
Exactly. But pretty much every one that you read will, it's much darker than you traditionally expect, and it's surprising that these were, people who read them to the kids, and there were folklores that people, the brothers wrote down, like the collection of different stories. It's very dark fantasy and not the Disney version of them.
We won't talk about what happens to Sleeping Beauty.
No,
we won't. Oh, jeez, no,
it's
God.
A family show.
The fuck it is, but even so, we have limits. Jeez. And, it does. Now that you say that, the Brothers Grimm, it really does. So a lot of the panels of the artwork I've seen really does evoke that sort of thing. A sleepy, quiet, pastoral town, little town full of little people waking up to say, "Oh my God, it's a giant fucking monster!"
Yeah, exactly. I've done it deliberately. I think there's going to be imagery in Candles that if people if you like fantasy or fairy tales, they're going to see imagery that they. Oh, I know what this is, and they can pick it up and look at it, and then, oh my God, this is like more terrifying, or this is not what I thought it was. It's I've purposely played with imagery that you might expect. Like on one of the panels, there's a page which is a splash page. It's this beautiful town, and it looks incredible. It's beautiful. It's all lush greens. It's daylight and blue skies, and then when you start flicking through the pages, like an explosion happens and chaos erupts, and there's a couple of scenes like that. So when we hit the ground running with the story, it's what you're in for. It's sort of like the thing that you used to, but twisted a little bit.
I mean, I think that's what some of the best stories, especially the best modern stories, really do. They lure you in with something that seems familiar, and then they turn it on their head. They present you something new to go along with it, and it's both comforting and familiar, but also actually tries to be original and does something new rather than just telling the same old stories time and time again. It's the best of both worlds scenario.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I've been working on this, I've purposely haven't gone, I didn't purposely go out and say, I want to take my stab at fantasy because for the sake of it. I've had the idea for this book for about a year. I've been developing it and working on pages and, again, quietly working on it while I've been doing everything else. Even before I finished Sevengal, I was working on this, and it's one of those things, if I start promoting and shouting about it then, get to now and everyone will be sick of hearing about it. So you have to time when you start talking about it. But yeah, I ran with it because I think I've got something interesting to say. I think I've got a really good idea and core behind it. So these opening pages that I've been showing off are the familiar but a little bit different, and tears will happen. You might be crying by the end of this. It might be a bit heartfelt, and I think people will be surprised. I'm being really careful. I'm not spoiling too much because this is. I mean,
what stage are you at now in terms of development?
Okay, so at the moment, script is finished. So Candles is a self-contained graphic novel. It's got a beginning, middle, and end, and then it's a one and done kind of thing. Script is done. About 70% of the line work is finished. So I'm working my way through line work before I start inking and colouring everything. I imagine the line work will be finished by Christmas. So when I come back from Christmas break, I'll be back onto inking. And there's 10 pages that are finished, fully coloured, lettered, that people can read for free, so they can see what a book's about and see the main characters and what's happening and giant wolves and monsters and fire and magic and all the happy stuff that you're going to find in this book.
Fucking group monsters coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah, exactly. There's everything links as well. There's nothing wasted. There's no filler. Like the opening scene with Grace and her father Levi walking through the village, having a conversation. That conversation is important to later on, and the village gets attacked by these one giant plague-infested wolf and a pack of wolves that start wreaking havoc on the town and the village. And these creatures are infected with a plague called Darkbark, which is a plague the evil witch has cast on the land, and it slowly turns your skin to tree bark. Ooh. If you imagine a zombie mixed with nature magic, and that's the kind of thing you get, and you lose control of what you want to do in your free will.
Oh my god, they're hippies!
Yeah, flower power and all that kind of stuff. Well, tree power. But yeah, it's again, like on first glance at it, you'll see these monsters, and then as the story goes on, you'll start clicking that everything's connected, and the seeds in the first 2 pages that will be relevant later on, and there's little Easter eggs and a paper trail for people to read, and there's a couple of plot twists as well.
So it's a story that requires you to pay attention.
Yeah, I think especially
good.
Once you've got about halfway through the book, there's a twist you probably won't see coming, but as soon as it happens, everything will fall into place, and your perception on what's been happening might not be the same. Yeah, again, it's sort of like I'm trying to tread that fine line of like, this is fairy tale fantasy. It's not going to be quite what you expect, but it's going to be familiar, and I don't want to spoil all the key plot points of the book, so it's kind of...
I don't want you to spoil stuff, because A, I don't want to spoil it for the listeners, but also I don't want to spoil it for me, because you can bet your ass I'm going to pick this up. Jeez.
Oh, thank you.
But so I want to talk about, as much as you can talk about the characters, some of the early characters, maybe the characters will follow through, as spoiler-free as you can. Who are these people, and why should we give a fuck about them?
Okay, well, we want to give a fuck about them. So, for the start of the protagonist is Grace. So Grace is she lives in this village that's attacked, and her family have been subjected to this evil witch and her magic for generations.
Damn you, Thatcher!
Well, spoiler, God damn it. Well, so magic to the villagers is nothing but evil, and they've had to deal with these monsters attacking the village, and they've tried to fight the witch for generations but have never succeeded. She's too powerful, so to them it's just a way of life and something they have to deal with. When Grace's family members are infected by this plague, Darkbark, Grace takes upon herself that she's going to be the one that's going to have to do something about this, because no one else will, so she sets off into the enchanted forest to steal magic from a witch and find a way to save her family. So that's the hero's journey that follows this story, and that's the main plot thread that we'll be following. And I've purposely done things. We're not going to rush through it and like go straight to Grace and the witch. You're going to see how the village has been affected. You are going to see these monsters, and
because the hero's journey is not like hero gets caught to adventure, finds adventure, defeats evil, goes home. There's a lot of stages in between.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you need to see how the world is lived in. You need to see what day-to-day life is like these people, and how people in the village and Grace's viewpoint is different.
How this world works.
Yeah, exactly. And this time generation and generation after generation, and Grace even has a birthmark on her cheek, which is the signs of the Darkbark infection. So it's sort of like it's got to the stage where anyone born is naturally infected by this plague, and it's only a matter of time before you turn. No one's going to escape it. It's going to happen one way or another. So it's quite heavy, particularly when you see what happens to villagers when they're infected, because the townspeople can't deal with them, and the most infected villagers are lured into the enchanted forest every night to be never seen again. So some, families torn apart moments and some, might be tears.
See, this is what happens when you don't invest in the NHS.
Exactly, God damn it, just cure the damn plague already, So yeah, that's the main plot point for Grace, and then we've got the antagonist, which is the witch, who I've mentioned quite a lot already, and you're gonna find out her viewpoint of the world. She does come into the book, but we're not rushing to get to her because there's plenty more things going on. But
give us a bit of build-up. You can't rush to Emperor Palpatine in episode 4.
Exactly. She is the Palpatine of the book, for a lack of a better comparison. And then alongside all this, we have Idris, who is a clumsy, flamboyant sorcerer, and his talented apprentice, Ava, who's quite young. So
will he be played by a future James Bond?
I was thinking more of a Tom Hiddleston, okay. So maybe, hopefully.
It's right there in the name, man!
I know, I'm just choosing to ignore it. It's brilliant writing. No one.
He can play anything! He's a god! A sexy, sexy god!
I know, we may as well just turn over our masculinity right now. I mean, he's taking it all.
Yeah. I wasn't using it, Idris. Here, have it!
Anyway, it's not the first comparison, but I love the name, so I can't change it now.
He doesn't own the name. There's one guy in the whole world named Idris that we know of. I think you're allowed to have it.
I don't know. I'll take the second one, and then after that we can't have any more.
Yeah,
that sounds fair. So Idris, he's out to do the right thing, and he's the father figure to Ava. So he's he's just trying to, get a bite to eat, just live his life and, stay out of trouble. But his apprentice, Ava, is she's a child, so she loves magic. She's obsessed with fire. And
oh, God. Never a good combination with a girl who can do magic and who is a small girl.
Yeah, exactly. A bit of a pyromaniac. And the thing is, it's the same thing, like she has an obsession with the town's blacksmith. And the blacksmith needs help lighting a fire, and Ava just tries to help light the fire, and it just goes horribly wrong. And some of the sample pages are after one such encounter, and Idris and Ava are being chased out of the town after a big angry mob after the street has been set on fire.
With one of the townsfolk going, "Not again!" So clearly this is a regular occurrence.
Yeah, it's sort of like this has happened more than once, and so they're trying to avoid it happening again. And the blacksmith pops up more than once, and it's sort of like as you've got Grace doing her thing and her introduction to the world, you also get the introduction to Idris and Ava and what's going on with them. They are eventually exiled from the town, and they find the source of the dark book that's going to, infect the town they're in. So Idris, knowing that he's the only one capable of stopping it in the area because no one else uses magic in this world, it's not seen as a good thing. Not because he wants to, but he feels like he must do the right thing and stop this before it can hurt anyone else. So Grace's story point and Idris and Ava's will hopefully meet, and you'd hope they'd band together and defeat the evil witch, but we don't know if that's going to happen. Not everyone may survive the night. And again, it's this whole thing of there's consequences to what these characters are doing in the world, and it's coming back into those Brothers Grimm fairy tales and weight.
I'm seeing a lot of parallels with a lot of other stories here, and that's because of the hero journey. It's such a either intentional or often cases unintentional blueprint for a character's journey or stories I've used in stories I've written, and both consciously and unconsciously, because it's a real universal concept that if you haven't done any research into the hero's journey capers, then really do it, because it is fascinating, and you will be amazed how many stories, not just in fantasy, but in all genres, all over the world, in every single type of medium, how relevant this concept is. It really is, in terms of fiction, a universal concept.
Yeah, it's one of the, I think I'm going to get it completely wrong now. There's only a certain amount of different types of stories. I think there's a template for, is it 8
It ranges, it depends who you ask. I've heard multiple different things. It ranges between 5 and 10, maybe 3. And because, yeah, there's those. Think about that. Even though if it was 10, that's only 10 stories we're telling it, or the entire lexicon of humankind. And it's just variations upon that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there's only 10 types of stories, but when you get to the individual who's writing said story, it's their take on it and it's their stamp on it, which is, I think it's really important when you're writing, that you need to have something to say and you have to have your take on it. Otherwise, you are just doing, what everyone else is doing or what's already been done.
Because, I mean, again, we go. Star Wars is probably the best example of this. Because you got episode 4 again. You got young lad on a farm, called to adventure, meets a wise old man, like a wizard person, confronts a great evil, goes through trials and challenges, and blows up a massive fucking space station. And compare that to another random film, like, say, one about a young girl on a desert planet who meets a wise old mentor and goes up and blows another giant planet thing. What was that called? Oh, yes, The Force Awakens! I'm still all over that! I'm sorry.
But it wasn't a Death Star.
Yes, it was! It was a fucking Death Star! It was just massive! And that's so fucking juvenile! Just like, oh, you had 2 Death Stars? Well, I'm gonna have my own Death Star, but it's gonna be, like, massive. It can kill, like, 5 planets at once, so then, yeah. It's the storytelling equivalent of my dad can beat up your dad.
Yeah. It's exactly the same, though, isn't it? Like, what we're saying, that these stories get told again and again, and hopefully you wouldn't do the same exact story for the same exact franchise, but hey ho, here we are.
Well, I mean, J.J. Abrams did it once, why not again?
Yeah, I mean...
That's 2 separate sci-fi franchises where he did a sequel to a previous one that was a rip-off of a previous, much more beloved movie. It's like, once, okay, I can understand you're trying to evoke something familiar. I get it. But twice? Really? You are better than that, J.J. Abrams. You are better. We all heard your keyboard solo and cool guys don't look at explosions. We know you can do better. And so, was it a conscious decision of yours to incorporate the hero's journey into the story? It's just like, okay, I want to be evocative of the hero's journey? Or was it just like a thing of, oh, this is something I can use to describe the story later on?
Well, actually, the starting point from all this is I moved roughly this time last year, and the idea for the book came from, in the distance, there's a forest on a hillside, and there's these flickers of light that appear on the hillside, and you have no idea what they were, and my mind wandering, I thought they were floating candles, which I know is ridiculous and fantastical, but that's what they looked like. I couldn't explain what they were. There was this phenomenal, brilliant, beautiful thing but which was a little bit eerie on the hillside. What I found out when the leaves fell off the trees is that in the distance there's a house behind the trees, and there's like flickers of light coming through the tree branches that are making these little pockets of light. So the idea before the book came from these flickering lights coming through the trees, I thought were candles. And from the other side of the forest during the day, I could see a house behind them, which during the day, it's just a house with trees. And then at night, these flickers of light come through that look like floating lights. And it's actually just the house lights. But the fantastical element of these lights along the tree line are what gave me the idea for candles. So then I had to ask, why?
Oh, that's why it's called candles.
Exactly. Yeah, there's floating candles.
I've been meaning to ask, because there was nothing in the material you gave me to indicate why it is called candles, and it has been actually kind of annoying me.
Yeah, well, there's a mystery to why. It's, again, one of the plot threads that's going to surprise readers, hopefully. And again, like, you've got this element of Grace and Idris and all this happening, and the candles are a really key part of it, but there's a surprise in store for you when they turn up. Like, you'll know when they turn up. But it's all to do with, in the Enchanted Forest, of these floating candles.
It turns out the candles are scented!
Yeah.
Ooh, sandalwood!
We've gone for a cinnamon candle in this one. I hope it comes through on the page.
Scratch and sniff.
Yeah, scratch and sniff. I'll see what we can do. That'd be interesting production costs. But anyway.
The people on Kickstarter, you want to do fucking what now?
Yeah, exactly. What? Or you could just have a scented candle with the book, like a bundle.
Yeah. Why the fuck not? Yeah, you settle down, you're ready to read the book, you light the candle. It's a nice, relaxing time, especially in the bath.
Oh, yes. A couple of floating in the bath maybe not so much because it might light the book on fire, but each to their own.
This isn't the Great Hall of Hogwarts, guys. Come on.
But yeah, these floating candles in the Enchanted Forest will show up at night time. But the starting point for the book was why would these candles be floating in the forest? Who would make them? What purpose would they serve? So yeah, that's the starting point, and then I had to figure out why these candles would be there, and that's when the hero's journey element came through, because the antagonist and the protagonist started coming into play. Of once started asking those questions, like things started to fall into place pretty quickly. Again, don't want to spoil too much. I'm being very selective because
be selective. It's fine. All the more to tease the capers with.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because, I mean, in British folklore, and just folklore in general, I suppose, like werelights and will-o'-the-wisps and stuff like that are a mainstay of that sort of folklore and that sort of fantastical culture. And it'll be interesting to see, because you don't see it that often, I guess, because, I mean, with a lot of fantasy stuff, they tend to go for a bit more of the outer stuff, like the monsters and stuff. It's rare that you see something more eerie and eldritch and ethereal and something else beginning with E incorporated in the story, and I like that. I like that sort of bit more gentle, but also still otherworldly aspect of it. Because I mean, looking at lights through the trees can be in your mind. At the very least, I often find myself transported to the idea of, ooh, what if?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just letting your mind wander, and I think I've kind of tricked people into the sample pages, which are really bright and colourful and set at daytime, but most people know my work from the majority of horror books I've worked on in the past. So the eeriness and the spookiness will be there. It's just, tricking you with the happy, bright stuff first, and then we'll get you with the twisted, dark stuff later. The sprinkles of horror will appear.
I mean, the coloured pages I've seen, they are very violent, very, very green, because they're on the edge of the forest, and I really like that. It reminded me a lot of something like Legend of Zelda or something. Just that kind of color palette, that kind of aesthetic, just this really lush and vibrant sort of thing, which really appeals to me, actually.
Yeah, I think it's been a bit of a palette cleanser for me, because most of the stuff that I've done, aside from Sabengal, has been set at nighttime, because when you draw monsters and you do horror books, most of these monsters only come out at night. Don't know why. That's just for scripts I've been
You never see a werewolf in the daylight.
Exactly. I mean, vampires, it doesn't really work for them, so it has to be at night time.
I mean, you can see a full moon during the day, as the certain conditions are right. You can see the moon on one end of the sky and the sun on the other. So why don't the werewolves stay like when the moon is up? How has that never happened? Someone write a story about that.
I know. I'll add it to the list. We'll get there. Maybe next year.
Then get on that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's again, all the idea for this book and how long I've been working on it, it's sort of like been this slow development cycle of while I've been working like with all the other stuff, and it's been good to finally start screaming, shouting about it, because when you're working on things like particularly with publishing, you can be working on different books at a time, and unfortunately some things don't get picked up, and this found a home with Unbound, which is why I've finally managed to be able to start talking about it, because it's got a home. Which, if people don't know what it is, Unbound is it's like Kickstarter, but it's more of a slow burn kind of Kickstarter. I mean,
yes, because we all know those fast Kickstarter projects that always come to fruition very, very quickly. There's never any Kickstarter projects that just like go on for months and months and months.
Do we not? I mean, they don't usually do very well if I've seen them, but
Nah.
Yeah, so Unbound's a little bit different, because the idea is that it funds while the creators work on the book. So with this, it's sort of like you see the updates of the book being made. And because otherwise I'd spend potentially another 6 months to a year of my life working on this book without showing anyone, which is quite isolating. It's not exactly great, because you want to be able to share this work. I mean, if I just disappeared from creating stuff in the world of the internet for a year, it wouldn't exactly be very good, because You've got to promote your book. You've got to talk about it. It doesn't count that you just make the book. You have to tell everyone in the world about it, because otherwise it doesn't count, apparently.
Yeah, because that's the worst thing about being a writer nowadays, especially an independent writer or independent comic book creator. You can't just be a writer or an artist. You have to be a salesman as well.
Yeah, you are, like, particularly like when you, like, I'm doing the art and the writing on this, is it's like a one-man band at times. I mean, and again, one of the things that I'm happy with Unbound is that you have an editor, and it's technically, once it's funded, it turns into more of a traditional publishing deal with distribution and the editor, and they handle all the production side of things, which is what all good publishers should do, and the marketing side of things.
Well, so that's a kind of a, from what I've heard on the independent comic book scene, that's kind of a unique collaborative process. It's sort of like a both world scenario again.
Yeah, it's sort of like the best way of describing it is if you imagine your on one side your Kickstarters and your traditional crowdfunding, and on the other side you've got your traditional publishing deals with an editor and distribution and a team behind you, and then you kind of mash them together, and that's what Unbound is, for lack of a better way of describing it. And they've been about for about 8 years now, but their graphic novel slate has only been about for roughly a year. Like, their first wave of graphic novels are starting to come out this year and next year, so there's been a bit of a, best way to describe it is that you've got to educate people about it, because it is very different from what people are used to, particularly with crowdfunding.
Yeah, which is good. We should always embrace new ideas, especially when they work.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and from my perspective, it's great that I've got an editor with Lizzie, she used to work at Self-Made Hero, and she really knows her stuff. Because you've got someone to help you develop the book and make it the best it can be, because you need that editorial eye with particularly these long form things.
David Molosky will tell you all about that, how he is desperately needed.
Yeah, and the other side is the distribution. I mean, I'd much rather spend the time making these books and screaming and shouting about them when I need to, but I'd much rather draw the book, write the book, and do all that kind of stuff than try and get it into shops and distribute and try and sell it overseas, which is really hard as an indie person. Like, there's only so much you can do, whereas they're actually part of Random House, which is one of the biggest publishing companies in the UK. They're Jonathan Cape, they're Penguin Books. This is like a branch of them, so they very much know what they're doing. It's just this Unbound is a new branch of their company.
Random Houses, I've definitely heard of them. I've definitely read books that have been published under their banner, as it were. I can't remember which ones exactly spring to mind, but yeah, that's a big thing.
Yeah, so part of Random House. So distribution side, they've got the infrastructure to get your book out there afterwards, which is, again, from the people who are going to read the book and pledge and support the book and pre-order it. That's probably not going to affect them that much, but from my perspective, it's really good. It's it saves me, if I did it all through Kickstarter, for instance, I'd have to wait a year for me to finish the book, and then I'd be packaging it and doing it all myself, which is a lot of work, and I don't mind doing it, but it's not ideal for every project you do.
And this means you can focus on the important stuff, which is writing and fine-tuning it and making it the best story you can make it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, because I'm working with an editor, it's a thing of she'll pick up on things that I will naturally miss working on a book this scale, and the fact that I've got to do the lettering as well and everything under the sun. It's sort of like you are naturally going to make mistakes because of the sheer volume of drawing involved. There's a no matter how good you are, I guarantee you've accidentally drawn two left hands at some point. Which, if someone can pick that up, that's really
He's got a deformity. It can happen.
Yeah, and like one thing I've thankfully corrected it. I'm currently about 64 pages into the line work, and there's been one or two times with this scar that Grace has on her cheek. I've accidentally forgot to draw it on, and then I've looked back at the page and I'm like, oh, she's suddenly got cured, and that's quite nice, she's having a good day. I'm like, oh wait, I need to draw a scar back on.
So speaking of that, describe for the capers, because I'm sure many of them do know, but some of them might not know, the actual process, the stage by which you physically make a comic.
Right, so you get your idea for your comic, you develop it, you do things like write down the story beats. The version I do is you can tell a story in 15 story beats. That is your Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. That usually helps you, give you a structure to work with. One thing I like to do is be able to describe it in a sentence. So that helps you boil down the narrative into its core part.
That's something that we were taught as well when I was studying script writing, that if you can't describe it in a sentence, then it's not a real story.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think you really know what it's about because, I mean, I speak to people at Comic-Con and they'll, I love chatting to people and writing ideas and stuff, and they'll start blurting off this big epic fantasy scroll of the story, and I'm like, 10 minutes have gone by, I still don't know what it's about, but it sounds great and epic. But
I mean, Lord of the Rings, biggest fantasy epic of all time. It's about two little guys chucking a ring into a volcano. That's it.
Yeah.
It's a magic ring, and there's a lot more to it than that, but that is the essential essence of it.
Yeah, the basic thing. Lots of walking.
Lots of walking, lots of fucking eagles!
Oh, a couple of people with pointy ears as well. Just a few.
Just a few, yeah.
So once you figured out that your story is in a sentence and you've got your story beats, then you start scripting it. I don't tend to do any drawing until the script is finished, or at least there's like a very good draft. And by good draft, I don't mean your first draft. I mean the 6 or 7 drafts that you've, gone over your first draft and figured out what's wrong with it and fixed it and changed it and messed with it and made it as good as it could be. So next to do with thumbnails, vis-a-vis drawings, the size of your thumb. These help me break down the comic page of how many panels are on there. If you've got 4 panels written in your script, there's multiple ways you can draw 4 panels on a page, so you need to make sure that you've got the grid of the page down correctly. The drawings will be really tiny, but they'll help figure out perspective, how you're going to lay things out on the page. Once this is locked down, I'll then do roughs. They're rough drawings, it's in the name. These are they're more refined drawings, but you're changing things and making sure the perspective is okay, that your characters are the right scale, the boring stuff that you need to make sure is correct and consistent. This stage is all about consistency and making sure that your characters look like your characters in a sketchy form. And then from there, it's line work. This is refined line work. My version is usually in pencil, or I draw it digitally and use a digital pencil, so it looks like pencil, but I can actually get more detail in there. Once those are done, I double check them, make sure everything's happy, and then I ink it. So this is in grey wash.
Like Bob Ross, gotta have it through there.
Just tweak it. First I throw ink on the page. I use about 5 different layers of ink to really build up the textures. I've done it at Comic-Con, and I start with really light ink, and I'll be flicking ink on the page, and it literally looks like I'm flicking water on paper, and people are like, what are you doing? And I'm like, but there is ink in there. There's a method to this madness. If I don't do this,
I know what I'm doing. Trust me.
Yeah. He says as he dips paintbrush in his coffee instead of water. So then I ink it.
That sky is meant to be brown.
Exactly. So do this all in grey wash. I work to about A3, so it's quite a decent size to work to, so I can get all the details and all the textures in. This is then scanned in. I then colour it digitally, because I think we touched on this before, I'm partly colourblind, so I don't see colour properly, so working digitally, I can actually change the colours if I need to. There's a colour picker, so if I'm not sure what I'm not sure if something is green, I can look up a picture of grass and colour pick the grass, which is really handy. But I've made all my brushes that I used to colour with digitally. I use a Cintiq, which is similar to an iPad, but better in my opinion. There's more drawing sensitivity and pen pressure. I've made brushes that work the same as chalk and oils and acrylic, so it's very much mixed media. It's just more controlled for me.
You're not exactly working on Microsoft Paint here. Exactly.
I mean, and the thing is
R.I.P. Microsoft Paint.
Yeah, your work is done. Rest easy. And the thing is, if you look at my final artwork, 99% of the time, no one can tell. No one can tell that I've done it half and half. People think I've done it all by hand and slaved away. Which is what I used to do. I used to do massive canvas paintings, which took forever to do, which is not ideal when you're freelancing. It's not ideal in comics when, there's so much to do.
I think some of the best, comic book or best artists in general have been people that paint and apply that to comics and other stuff. Like Alex Ross, I think he paints, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, he does. He uses a lot of photo references and he paints by hand, and it's incredible the amount of stuff he does and the detail. I think particularly people who want to draw, students have a bad habit of doing it. They jump straight to the computer and they jump straight to using a Cintiq or a tablet or an iPad or whatever, but they haven't learnt the drawing skills. They haven't
walk before you crawl. No, crawl before you walk.
Exactly. Like, I mean, like life drawing, I mean, it gets drilled into you if you go to art school, and it's so important. It's incredibly important to learn anatomy and being able to draw with just a pencil or whatever material you prefer using.
Learn how to draw human beings.
Exactly. I mean, realistically, any form of art, even if you sculpt, you'll learn things from that you can apply to drawing. But again, like these traditional drawing skills I've learned, and then I just use them in a different way now, which is better for me, how I've developed my style and how I work. I know some people who have a similar thing of they'll work traditionally, but they prefer to do absolutely everything by hand, which is perfectly fine. And they might do a couple of touch-ups digitally, but for me, it's very much half and half. I'm one of those special Smurfs that does half by hand, half digital, and it somehow works. And it took a while to develop, but once I've cracked how I do it, it's just like rinse and repeat now. It's like following a recipe.
I don't see why it wouldn't work. I think some of the best techniques for any sort of visual storytelling are ones where you combine traditional techniques and modern techniques. Again, it's a best of both worlds thing. I mean, I go on and on and on about how much I love practical effects, but some of the best practical effects are ones that are enhanced by CGI. It's when you go full-on CGI that things start to get a little bit crappy and a bit too, Jar Jar Binks.
Green screen to death.
Green screen to death, and then again, there are practical effects that look dated and cheap and tacky, and it's when you combine the two, you combine modern techniques with traditional sort of things to make something really unique that comes alive. And because there's so many different ways of doing any one thing when it comes to storytelling and to go to visual mediums. To limit yourself to one, I mean, if you're doing it for like an exercise or to challenge yourself, fine, fair enough. But if you're going to create something, you need to be open to different ways of expressing that.
Exactly. I mean, I always got taught to look at everything. So even though I did a comics course at degree level, I was like, we were taught to, look at sculpture, go look at theatre, look at music, go to gigs. Like, you have to be really open. I mean, if you get that tunnel vision of just looking at the one type of thing, your work can become quite stale, which you want to avoid, because you can, as soon as you can do one thing forever. And you get some guys who will, for instance, they'll draw spaceships and love drawing spaceships and have a wonderful time drawing spaceships, but after you've drawn 500 spaceships, if they're all looking the same, then something's wrong. You need to look outside of just the one thing.
Maybe this spaceship could be a tree. No, wait, that's stupid.
Oh, you're digging at Saga now, aren't you?
I am fucking digging at Saga forever and ever. Like, that's a fantasy for me done wrong. That's when you combine... It's an awkward pairing of sci-fi and fantasy that just doesn't quite work. Star Wars combines fantasy and sci-fi, I think, very well. There's plenty of other things that combine sci-fi and fantasy really, really well in really unique and interesting ways. And that one was just like, let's just throw whatever random shit we can on the page and see what's sick. I mean, I haven't read all of Saga. I haven't even read that much of Saga. But the little I had read of it, just everything about it rubbed me the wrong way. And it's really annoying because I love the writer on it, Brian K. Vaughan. I think he's amazing. He created one of I think I discussed it when we were out working together. I think Why the Last Man, which is one of my personal favourite comic books of all time.
Yeah, I only read that this year for the first time, and I was like, why have I not read this before? But yeah, I think, going back to Saga, I think, was it one of those books that just wasn't for you? Like, you
I think, yeah. Let me put it this way. If you enjoy Saga, more power to you. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't like it. I have reasons why I feel the way I do. I have the reasons why I feel the way. I never say I don't like something without fucking backing it up, because otherwise that would just make me a cynical troll, and that is something I swear I will never be. But it's one of the, again, it's not harmful, but it's not. I don't feel about Saga the way I feel about Disney, where I think this isn't just bad, this is wrong. I think Saga isn't good, but it's not good for me, for my personal taste. And you may look at it and you may really like the fact that it's narrated by the fucking baby. You know, I look at that and I think, that's fucking stupid. But you may think differently, and that's what makes planet Earth so special to live on.
Yeah, I was just interested in what your point of view on it, because like we have got into that mentality sometimes that like, I hate this, so it shouldn't exist, which I think is wrong, and you know you need to be open to different stuff. But it's nice to hear that you can talk about it and go, yeah, it's not your cup of tea. All power to you. Great, wonderful.
If my latest time travel sojourn has taught me anything, is that there's lots of different ways to hate things, and some of them are okay, but some of them are not okay, and you need to be careful and really think about why you dislike something. You really do. And I mean, there's plenty of fantasy stuff out there. I talk about how much I love fantasy that I don't like, and stuff that I do, and stuff that I'm like meh about. And it's one of those things where it's always going to be an element of subjectivity. There's always going to be an element of personal taste, no matter what it is. And there's plenty of stuff in good fantasy stuff that I don't like. That I don't like. Talking about Lord of the Rings, I read the Lord of the Rings books exactly once, and once was enough for me. I'm not saying they were bad. They're not. They're fucking awesome. But I got to the end and was just like, I don't regret reading these. I am glad I read them, and I'm glad I know the story. I will never feel the urge to read these. I'll feel the urge to read The Hobbit every now and again. I fucking love The Hobbit. That's like the second proper book I ever read, and the first proper book I ever read was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, so we're starting to see why I'm so into fantasy right now.
Yeah.
But Lord of the Rings, it was really a one and done kind of thing.
Yeah, I had a similar thing with the Northern Lights trilogy.
Oh, see, I'm reading that now.
You see, how far are you in? Have you read the first book?
I'm reading the first book because at my work, that's where I work, at the break room, they've got a couple of books in there. And like one of the few books I considered picking up, because like they got a great selection of like Tat that I've never heard of and Grey by E.L. James. So, but I saw the Northern Lights and I heard so much about that, and I saw the movie and I heard about how much the movie sucks compared to the books. I thought it's about fucking time that I pick this up, and I'm probably gonna for the foreseeable future only read the Northern Lights, and maybe I'll pick up the sequels later on if I see them at my local library or something.
Yeah.
But I'm about 2/3 of the way through it, 3/4. Like, she's just gone to the place where the bad stuff happens with all the kids.
Yeah.
I won't reveal any more than that. And so far, I'm rather enjoying it. I'm not as into it as I have been with some other stuff I've read lately. I recently read this book by, I think she's called Laini Taylor, I can't remember, and it's this book called Strange the Dreamer.
Okay, I've not heard that one.
It's I really fucking enjoy it. It's really again, it's going back to this idea of combining similar sounding things but then throwing twists in there. It's really has a very unique lore and very engaging characters, and it features a romance that I started reading at the point where I was leaving a romance, and it hit me where the feels are.
Oh, bless you.
Oh God! Laszlo, why? His name, the main character's name is Laszlo Strange, and he's strange name, but it was very good. I've been sort of voraciously reading a lot of fantasy books lately. I read recently this omnibus book of fantasy called Orcs. Have you read it?
I haven't read that one either, no.
Stan Nichols, and it's I think we're slightly familiar now with this idea of, they're orcs, they're supposed to be big and tough and scary and evil. Oh, but actually there's a different side to them, and it sort of combines on that. That book was, I don't want to spoil anything for anyone. It is worth reading, I think. The ending, though, contains some thematic elements. Are you ever going to read Orcs?
Probably not with my to-read list, so
well, I'm going to fucking spoil Orcs now, because I wanted to talk about this for a while, and you don't get that often on a show that is mainly centered around comic books and superheroes. You don't get to talk about Orcs that much.
Okay, go for it.
So, but the idea is that these Orcs live in this land called Maristantia, or Centrasia, as it's known, or Centrasia, I don't know, as it's called by the humans, who've encroached upon the land and are like destroying the magic of the land. They're seen as invaders by like the orcs and the gremlins and all the other dwarves and people that live in these lands. They're seen as, aggressors coming in and destroying stuff. And It's kind of interesting dealing about it's dealing with thematic elements of like migrant people coming in and how they're viewed, because as the orcs go through the land, they discover that like actually some of the humans are bastards, but not all of the humans are bastards, and actually most of the fantasy races are just as bastard prone as the humans are. And it was felt like it was really building up this message of peace and tolerance, and how if it's okay that people come into the land as long as they're not dicks about it, and also that people who welcome them into the land aren't dicks to them. And it was really, really interesting. Then it gets to the end, and it's revealed that all of the fantasy races, except for man, actually were transported to Maristantia from other worlds via magic, and the only way they'll ever be happy is if they fuck off back to their own home planets, essentially. And basically, I thought it was building up this idea of all the races trying, at least, to live in harmony. But actually, it seems like my view is, what I got from the book is, the main message of the book is everyone is much, much happier if they stick in their own places and no one intermingles. I found that... I felt like the rug was pulled under me thematically, and that's never happened before. It was really weird.
Yeah, that's... Don't know how
I don't know if that was the author's intention. Because death of the author, we may never know his true intentions unless I'm sure he's spoken about it. I don't know. I haven't cared to look. But for me personally, reading that, it felt very like, oh, okay, so they're going to like the orcs version of paradise, great, but that's their happy ending, leaving this place that they thought was their home and that they had a place in for some other place separate from everyone else. That feels really, really weird to me.
Yeah.
I put you off reading it now, sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. It's spoiled away now anyway, so I'm good. I got the cliff notes. Is it quite a new book?
I don't think so. I think it's been out for a while. I've got it right in front of me here. I'm gonna fucking check. I'm gonna do some fucking research for once. Jeez.
Do you want some elevator music?
Yeah. Right. The first book, I got the omnibus version, which is like all the books. But the first book was published it's called Legion of Thunder. It was published in 1999.
Okay, I'm just curious because of like viewpoints change, and like I feel like if that went through an editor, like it like
now,
yeah, it would probably they might have just gone. I see what you're going for, but could we maybe
this book feels a little bit Brexity to me.
Yeah, which I mean, each your own. I guess we're not allowed to like censor anything in that sense, but it's sort of like a bit of a.
You might not be. I will. If I think a thing is thematically saying that people are better off separate and that multiculturalism isn't a good thing, or at least it's an important thing, I'm going to say no, fuck off with that shit, because that's not okay. That's not a nice viewpoint to have. If you have it, not fine, not fine, but fine, I will acknowledge that is your viewpoint. But at the same time, that's not a good viewpoint to have. I think there's a difference between censorship and saying, like, this isn't okay. Like, if I was a film executive and had someone come up to something that I considered blatantly racist, I wouldn't greenlight it. Of course, that doesn't stop a lot of film executives now fucking people who made Pan!
Never saw it. I'm glad I didn't.
Don't. Even aside from the whitewashing controversy, it's a fucking stupid movie. I really like the Peter Pan story. I like how there's so many different adaptations of it. You've got, like, the traditional adaptations. You've got Hook. You've got the 2004 version, or 2003 version, which I really like. You've got that fucking other racist one from Disney. Fuck you. And then you have this, which is meant to be like an origin of Peter Pan, which is something we hasn't been seen quite a lot. And it's got all these interesting, again, fantasy elements into it. But most of the fantasy elements boil down to, let's see what kind of exposition thing we can cover. Like, we've got the wood paneling of flashbacks, and we've got the waters of the flashback. And it's just, that's it, basically. And maybe and this weird thing, like the indigenous tribes, I wouldn't call them Native Americans because they're fucking not, as far as I can tell.
Oh, yes.
When they get shot, they like burst into like coloured smoke or coloured powder or something. And it's just like, really? Why does that happen? Why is that not explained? And then they turn pixie dust into fucking unobtainium! Literally, pixie dust is not like this magical thing that pixies turn in that makes people fly. No. It's a fucking mineral that Blackbeard, played by Hugh Jackman, is looking at because he's using it to keep himself young, despite the fact that he lives in Neverland, where people never grow up! Why does he need it? And then he finds this giant cavern of pixie dust inhabited by all the pixies. It's like, at last, I shall live forever. And I was sitting here thinking, no you won't. You'll live as long as the pixum that it's called. It's called pixum, not pixie. That's pixum. And you'll live however long that lasts, which might be fucking millions of years, but it's going to run out. You're like the fucking people who think that oil is going to last forever. It's fucking not. No, this is a finite resource. It doesn't matter if there's an abundance of it. There's only a small amount. And the only good bit in the movie, the only good bit, is when Hugh Jackman walks out of the flying pirate ship and sings Smells Like Teen Spirit. What the fuck?
Oh my god. I didn't realise it was that bad.
There's so many more things. Like, oh my god, the film is fucking set during the Blitz in the 1940s, despite the fact that the original story takes place in like Edwardian times. So wouldn't this be like early Edwardian, Victorian, maybe even further back than that times? Because it's supposed to be taking place before the main events of the story. Like before Captain Hook is a bad guy even. And so why is that? And then so it's in the 1940s, which is after the Edwardian times, and yet they still have Smells Like Teen Spirit, a song from the fucking 90s in it. What kind of wibbly wobbly timey wimey bullshit is going on here?
See what I mean? We just don't need any more Peter Pan. I think we're panned out.
I wouldn't say that. Again, it's a question of the great thing about fantasy, the great thing about Peter Pan and stuff like that is that you can do infinite variations on any one thing, and there will be more Peter Pan stories, and some of them will be good and some of them will be bad. It's okay, because it doesn't. The great thing about those sorts of story is you can tell them not ad nauseum, but as close to nauseum as you can get, because they offer themselves up. Fantasy offers itself up to so many new ideas and new variations, and like any story, it doesn't always work, but sometimes when it does work, it's brilliant. And you get a Peter Pan story like the 2003 version with Jason Isaacs as Captain Hook, which I fucking love. I will hear no argument against it. And you get like the Sky TV movie thing with Rhys Ifans. I'm just going by Hook actors now. And sometimes you get Hook! Like, I have mixed feelings about Hook in the best of times, but I'll admit it's a fucking joy to watch sometimes because it's Robin Williams flying around going, caw, 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 caw! It's awesome! And
one from childhood. It's a good point. I mean, I think as long as you've got your stab on it, or your hook, if you will.
Yeah, see what you did there.
Oh, yeah. But, you know, it's as long as you've got your version of it and you've got something to say, or, you know, it's again the whole thing of if you're just remaking it for the sake of remaking it, then for the love of God, just don't give it us. I think one of the recent ones is the Jungle Book's the same. The Jungle Book, we've got multiple versions, and we've got the version which is now going to Netflix instead, and I didn't think I wanted another Jungle Book so soon after the other version, but anyway.
I fucking warn people about. I think in my very first podcast appearance, the Jock and Nerd podcast, I warned people that this was happening, and they weren't sure about it. They looked it up and said, "Oh my god, this is happening." And I've been warning people for years about Disney live action remakes and how it's stopping other people from telling these stories, and how it's just, again, ad nauseum, this stuff. And you all laughed at me, but now people are starting to fucking come around and realise, actually, you know what, all of these live action remakes, they're kind of a bit much now. There's a bit too much of them, and it's just like, well, who's come crawling back? I'm a bit amped now, a bit amped. Talking about Pam will do that to me. Oh, God. Moving swiftly away from that stuff. Candles.
The non-scented kind.
The non-scented kind. When can we hope to see it?
So, I'll be working on it over the next couple of months. I think realistically, it will be in people's hands finished towards the end of next year, or so end of 2019, or
in time for Christmas.
Yeah, you'd hope so. It's realistically, I'm going to be working on it either way. It's more the funding aspect of it. You know, the book goes into production once it's funded. So it is a case of, to do the whole salesman thing, please check it out, please pledge if you can. And I understand that some people like, I'd rather just buy it off the shelf, but it's sort of a thing of the whole point of crowdfunding is support the creator while they're making it. And this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a long process of making these books.
More than that, I think it's also like a relay race. It's stages, and sometimes you need someone's hand outstretched, ready to take the baton from you.
Exactly, and I think it's okay to ask for help. I think that's one thing. Like, it's a case of this book will not get made without help. I'll be sat here working on it, but my aspect of needing help is I need help with an editor and distribution, but I also need help from people pre-ordering the book, because that shows to Unbound that there's a market for this kind of book and people want it. And thankfully, like, I have had people who are starting to support it very early on in the creation of it, which is great. And that's people who have faith in me and my track record on making these books. People are like, Lynn's making a new book, it's fantasy, great, sign me up, I trust it, which is really nice. And it's very humbling, because if to some people with indie books, like, they've had they've been stung by Kickstarters or crowdfunding when they've pledged and not got the book back. And thankfully, like, everything that I've worked on, people have got the book, which is great. Because
speaking as someone who has seen your work before and interacted with you and stuff, I can say, Capers, Lyndon White is a safe bet. He is a good investment in terms of you want some good storytelling and some great artwork. He really is.
Thank you. Yeah, and I keep telling people when, like, I've been telling people at conventions or when I've been doing interviews and stuff, that I have been putting a lot into this. Like, it's not, the artwork is amped up to the next level. This is my version of magic, and you're gonna. I'm trying to make sure I'm putting everything into this book as much as possible from a writing and art perspective. And when someone's flinging a fireball, you are going to see the effects of that fireball and how it's cast. It's not just good if the character stood still and this is a magical button, which I think some books are quite guilty of that, of just having their characters standing, oh, what a magical world it is, and aren't we magical, and oh, don't we look pretty, and then nothing actually magical happens, or the magic's just them holding something and nothing. There's no
Shannara Chronicles.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way I can describe it is there's a lot of movement in the action. So when you see the magic effects, you'll see the movement of the characters and how that interacts with the world. But yeah, I really do hope people enjoy it, because you're going to definitely be able to tell it's my stamp on fantasy and this world that I've created. But you can tell by looking at just the line work and the samples that there's more detail, there's more emotion. There's a lot that I'm putting into this one.
It is superbly detailed. It's difficult to communicate just over a podcast, but it is superbly detailed. Even the stuff where I've seen where it's just line work is very detailed. You can tell that you're just even starting to build on it already, and it's there's so much to it, and it's annoying because I want to read it now and I can't. Damn you, Lyndon! Damn you!
No, but at least you've been able to see like some of the extra stuff that people haven't seen yet. You've
this is true. This is true. I've been able to see like some of the cover stuff you've done, and there's one bit in particular that I really like because it's just got candles. It's got one of the characters on it. I believe it's Grace. I think. Yeah, I think it looks like Grace. And it's very, very evocative, in my mind, of something from Studio Ghibli, or however you call it.
Very nicely done. Yeah. Yes. I've mentioned it in the pitch video that this is, if you imagine two different pillars, one is Brothers Grimm, the other's Studio Ghibli, and they're kind of like holding up the influence of this book. I'm a huge Ghibli fan, both from storytelling and art. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've spoken to people who said, "Oh, it's inspired by Studio Ghibli," and they had no idea what I was talking about, and I felt like slapping them.
Hand in your geek cards right now.
I know exactly, and I was like, I didn't know whether to slap them or hug them. Studio Ghibli, huge influence, and it's got the fingerprints of that influence all over this book in terms of like how the fantastical elements and the lighter tone as well. And Studio Ghibli have this habit of the films are lighter in tone, but then get serious, and the themes are quite heavy. And I'd say it's taken more influence from things like Mononoke and Howl's Moving Castle, Spirited Away, rather than Grave of Fireflies.
Yeah.
Which is
I,
one of my
I would kind of hope so.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite films.
But it is very good. I've
Yeah.
also I noticed in the stuff you've given me, it's very reminiscent of a film that a lot of ex-Ghibli people worked on. Came out more recently. I think it was done by Toho film. No, maybe not. It's called Mary and the Witch's Flower.
Someone's mentioned that to me. It's on my hit list to watch, but I've not actually seen it yet.
It's very good. I watched the dubbed version in the cinema a while back, and it was really lovely. It's also weird because it's a Japanese film, it's Japanese animation, but it's set in England with English characters, and they really fucking captured the English countryside in a really beautiful way. As someone who spent a fair amount of his life growing up in various parts of the British countryside, it was really lovely. It felt very Cotswoldy, very Beatrix Pottery almost. It was lovely.
It's almost like that. It's that British whimsy.
Yeah,
is the best way to describe it. I mean, I'm from north of England, and
I'm so sorry.
I know, and someone has to live there. But I'm used to seeing like dry stone walls and getting lost in fields, and from where I grew up, I could walk 5 minutes and I'd be in the middle of nowhere, and we'd be on the edge of town, and there'd be nothing for miles. And I think that's one thing that I can safely say I know what it looks like. I know what it looks like to get lost in the British countryside, which helps when you're drawing.
Well, yeah, there's two sides of the British countryside. There's the lovely side, the evocative side, the gentle, idyllic side, and then there's the this is fucking miserable. When can we go home countryside?
Yeah, cold. It's wet.
Admittedly, most of that congregates in Wales, but still.
Yeah. Well, I studied in Wales, so I can't win either way.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We were talking about Candace at one point. Okay, so ready next year. Is there a Kickstarter going on? No, it's Unbound, isn't it? It's Unbound.
It's Unbound. So it's the easiest way to describe it is Unbound. Very similar to Kickstarter. There's pledge levels. There's a video. There's samples of the artwork.
There will be a link in the show notes, Capers. Check it out. I command you.
Or go to www.unbound/books/candles.
Try remember to include that link, jeez. Yeah, I will.
Yeah, I'll give you a link. You'll find it.
Please do, yes. Because this talking about people helping out and collaborating. These episodes are now being, almost all of them, if not all of them, are being edited by PlayStation Capes, one of PlayStation Capes' newest members, Alex Mirabal. So thank you very much, Alex, for doing that and helping us out with that. We started crediting, we started crediting to her in the show notes, but I thought I wanted to give her a shout out, just to say thanks for helping, because especially in recent months, you talked about helping in the collaborative process. A lot of people have really helped me out with a lot of stuff on Podcapers, and it's been really, really nice to get that much about help from people. So it's nice when we help each other, especially when we're creating lovely stories like yours. And I can't wait to read it, Lyndon. It's going to be fantastic.
Thank you very much. I do hope you enjoy it when you get the finished thing.
Hey, the material you give me is anything to go by. I'm sure I will. And Capers, now we talked about something we love. We've been very passionate on the show, but now we have to get a bit serious, unfortunately. And I knew this day was going to come one day. I really didn't want it to, but I'm doubtless by the time this episode goes out, you will have heard. But we literally heard about it a few hours ago, if less than that. Unfortunately, the man Stan Lee has unfortunately passed away, and I won't say it was too soon because the man was 95, and he fucking lived a life. He really did. But it's sad. It's very, very sad, because not only because this is a man who I believe changed the way the way we view stories and Western culture in general forever. He changed that forever, and he had a lot of help. He always spoke about how he co-created things and always collaborated with people. And that's something he did. He really did change our perception of storytelling. He's one of those writers. People tend to dismiss comic book writers as less than influential. Like, you wouldn't hear people talking about Alan Moore in the same sentence as J.R.R. Tolkien. but they really do deserve to be. And Stan Lee, in particular, for the things he does. Right now, in addition to the Northern Lights, I'm also reading, I picked up from my local library, The Essential Hulk, which is like all the early Hulks, and they stand the test of time. The story about a man who transforms into a monster, and the fight and the duality between the two of them, that has lasted to this day in comics and in movies and cartoons and video games. It is just as relevant now as it was back then in the mid to early 60s, the early to mid 60s rather, and it shows just how good of a writer he is. And yes, you may look back on that stuff and see how dated it was in terms of maybe like the dialogue or the language, but I don't care about that stuff because the characters are just so great. And it's down to his writing and the artists that he worked with, because he really thought about, because I don't want to disparage all the great comic book writers that came before him, and there were so many, but a lot of people just saw these things as just for kids, and therefore you didn't have to put as much effort into them. And that's sadly a mindset that still continues to this day. There's still so many people that still think that just because it's for kids, you don't have to try as hard, you don't have to put as much effort in, you don't have to be as serious or as deep or as philosophical as you would have to be with adult stuff. And Stan Lee didn't think that way. He never thought that way. He always wanted to push the envelope and push the boundaries of what you could do with these characters. He wanted stories where the woman character was just as strong as the male characters, where the kid, the teenager, wasn't the sidekick, where the monster was actually the hero, where the blind man was the superhero. And we saw so much of ourselves in some of these. I know I certainly did. When I was a little kid and I was moving from place to place all the fucking time, and each time I moved, I found it more and more difficult to make friends. And I had friends, though, in these characters. I saw so much of myself in Peter Parker. I was a little nerd who couldn't make friends, and I saw myself in him. And I will always be so grateful to Stan Lee, because he made a very lonely boy feel a little less lonely. He really did. He made me see myself in other people that were so much greater than me and so wonderful and so brilliant. And that's something that we still continue to this day need. We talk about representation and opportunities in the media so much. I talk about that a lot. And that's partially why I talk about it, because when I was going through such a hard time in my childhood, I'm not going to say it was awful, I'm not going to say it was terrible, it could have been a lot worse, but it was at times very hard. But he made it less hard. He made it bearable because he created these wonderful characters and stories in the 60s that in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, I was still reading, because it mattered to me just as much as anything else that's been made at the time. At the time I was reading Harry Potter and all that sort of stuff, and on the list of influences, J.K. Rowling is up there, but you know, so is Stan Lee, because he made stuff that is iconic and timeless and matters. It matters so much. Even still, people still, even now, kids right now are picking up Spider-Man comics for the first time, and they are getting into that character and getting into these characters all over again. It's a generational it's not a generational thing. It's a universal thing. It keeps on going and going, and it will never die. It will never. Stan Lee has sadly passed, and he is gone from this mortal world. But he lives on in his characters and his creations, because I think they will last forever. Okay, nothing lasts forever, truly. But if anything would, it would be these characters. It would be Spider-Man and Iron Man and the Hulk and the Fantastic Four and all these other wonderful things that he played. And more than that, all the people that he inspired in turn, who went on to become comic book creators. He lives on in them as well. I don't know how much of an influence he had on you, Lyndon, but I like to think that he lives on in you and your work and the work of all the other writers who have gone to work for Marvel or DC or whoever, and who have created their own characters who have been inspired by him and his philosophy. This is a man who challenged the Comics Code Authority, said, no, these are the stories that aren't just good stories, these are stories that we need to be telling, and you can't tell us we can't tell them. because we need to tell them. Imagine, I can only imagine if someone, because actually when he was creating Spider-Man, I don't know who the editor was at the time. I can't remember the name of the editor, but he was saying, like, you can't have a kid be the main hero. He's always the sidekick. And so I was like, no, I think this will work. I really think this will work. And he didn't listen to narrow-minded, stuck in the past ways of thinking. He said, I think there's something here. And there was something there. There was something amazing there. And then, after Amazing Fantasy 15 came out, that same editor came to him and said, hey, remember that Spider-Man character that we both love so much? And that's the thing. See, there's so much love put into his work, and it made us love them in turn. And I can go back to my Essential Spider-Mans and my Essential Ghost Rider, my Essential Fantastic Four, and look at them, and I know not all the Marvel characters were made by him, like Ghost Rider, but it's there. The love he put in there is an inspiration, and like a stone in a pond, it created a ripple effect spreading throughout the comic book industry and to all of fiction, to show just how much, if you care about your characters, care what you're doing, and you really think about what you're doing, you can create something magical, truly magical. And he was not limited to the work he did as a comic book artist. He's a husband and a father, and he created the Stan Lee Foundation, and he interacted with fans, and he wrote other stuff. He's written books, he's written like film treatments, and he's written. I've listened to poetry of his that he's read. There's this one particular one I've got this DVD called Mutant Monsters and Marvels, which is basically just an interview with him and Kevin Smith. A rather serious interview, actually, that I watched when I was rather young to be watching such a serious interview. Well, Kevin Smith actually took it pretty seriously. Stan Lee was just his usual effervescent self, and is talking about all these sorts of things. And I think it was one of the DVD extras was, or a DVD extra was something at least, was him reading this poem called God Woke. And I won't repeat it to now, because even though I do remember parts of it, it doesn't do it justice. Look it up if you can find it online. If you can get a DVD with it on it, look it up, because it's amazing. It's very serious and melancholy and tragic, and there was such a depth to him as a writer, and it shows in the comics and it shows in the other stuff. But it's something I think a lot of people get. But despite that, he never lost that spirit of the merry Marvel marching society. He never lost that Stan the Manly, enough said, onwards and upwards to greater glory mentality. And in the later years of his life, there were rumours and stories about elder abuse, about how he was being controlled and manipulated, and I don't know what the truth is in that. He went out and said, he released a video that I watched, and he said, I am fine, I appreciate people, being worried about me, but, that's simply not the case. We're living in a time where, unfortunately, rumours can spread very quickly, and we may never know the truth exactly about that, but in that moment, I believed him, because I saw Stan Lee, and I thought, it's Stan Lee. He knows what he's talking about, because he knows what he's doing, and I'm not saying he wasn't manipulated or abused or controlled in any way, but I believed him. I believed him because I could never look at that man and see anything other than truth and honesty and genuineness, I guess, because that's always how he came across. And I'm sure there's plenty of times where controversy followed him, and rumors followed him or something, because that's the same with any public figure, I guess. But I don't think any of that matters. I really don't, because I think, again, the work he did and the person he was shines through. And I'm gonna fucking miss him. I really am, because even today he was active and he was doing stuff, and I hit me shortly after I heard the news that, oh my god, I'm never going to see him cameo in another movie again. The last time we're probably going to see him cameo, I don't know if he's in it, but maybe, hopefully, I really fucking hope, Infinity War, because Otherwise, we're left with that cameo in Venom and the cameo in the Spider-Man PS4 game, which actually I do really like because it's him. I don't want to spoil anything. I'm going to spoil it. Sorry, keepers, if you haven't seen or played the Spider-Man PS4 game. There's a scene where Peter and Mary Jane, Peter leaves the a restaurant that they're in to go fight crime. Mary Jane is sticking around, and Stanley is just standing behind the counter. He obviously works in the pizza place. He's got a lot of jobs, Stanley, in all these cameos. And he just says, good to see you two back together again. You two were always my favourites. And he always talked about how Spider-Man was his favourite and how much he cared about these characters. Because that's the thing. So many writers and people, like, they write the characters, they enjoy them for a while, and then they move on. And that's fine, because, they're going to do other things. But he always, no matter how many new things he did or how many other things, he always held on to the things that he truly cared about. And that was Stan Lee. And because he cared about it so much, again, it made us care about it. And made us care about him in turn. And he will be missed, but as I said, he's immortal. He will carry on. For his spirit echoes throughout the halls of Marvel and the halls of comic books, the halls of graphic novels, and all of fiction. I think he's one of those icons. His name is written in the stars. And as long as we hold true to his ideals of, pushing the envelope, trying your best, truth and justice, where the good guys win, the bad guys lose, but there's more to it than that, where, kids can be heroes and women can be strong, and it doesn't matter what you look like or who you are or where you come from, you can be a fucking hero. And I'm going to carry that on with me, and I'm going to really put that into my life, as I have done since I was 5 years old, because that's what he means to me, and I'll be damned before I forget his lessons. And I'm going to leave you with that one word of his that always meant so much to me, because it encapsulates so much about always being true to yourself, about being better than yourself, and about always striving to do better. Excelsior. And on that note, I think we're going to end the show. Sorry, I rambled on for a bit, Lyndon. Thank you for putting up with me.
No, it's fine. It was all good. It was, I think, the best way to describe the man. I think everyone's got a Stanley story of how good the man was and his work and how he was as a person. So, yeah, it was perfect.
Thank you. And if you enjoy the show, Capers, please tell your friends, shout from the rooftops, and everyone to go back into some of our super episodes, like the last time we spoke with Lyndon at Wolverine Comic Con, or when we were talking about The Mind of James Fangal. It's great, you should check it out. And you can listen to the show on iTunes, Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, or at podcapers.com. We have a Patreon, check out the rewards, patreon.com/AP2HYC. If you want to get in touch with us, suggest show topics, or come on the show yourself, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AP2HYC, or email us at podcapers@AP2HYC.com. Thank you very much, Dan Harris, for our logo, the lovely microphone, the red and blue 3D glasses. Those are mine. And thank you for listening. And thank you, Stanley. This has been Podcapers, the official podcast of a place to hang your cape. Cue the music.